Hello my friends, this is Eric Parker with One Number Tableau Experts, and in this week's video we're going to cover the world of window functions, which are a subset of table calculations in Tableau. So let's go ahead and dive into it. I'm going to borrow some resources that come from a longer video of ours called How Do Tableau Table Calculations Work? So if that's of interest to you, I'll drop a link to that in the description below. That'll give you a really good background for the world of table calculations in general. But today, in this video, we're going to cover specifically the window functions. So a little background on table calculations. A regular calculated field, not a table calculation, just like simple math, this column minus that column. The way that you can conceptualize that in Tableau is as if it's adding a new column to your data source, okay? So if you viewed your underlying data in Tableau, you'd see a new column of data, okay? Now, changing gears here a little bit, aggregations in Tableau is when Tableau takes, potentially numerous rows of data and summarizes them into a single value. You'll notice that Tableau does that all the time. When you pull a measure into a worksheet, it will maybe make it a sum, or you could change that to an average or a maximum. But Tableau, what it's always trying to do by default is to take a measure and aggregate it at the dimensional level that you ask for, okay? So a table calculation gives you the ability to reference those aggregated values and then do something like rank them or calculate a percent of total based on those aggregated values. Or specifically in the world of window functions, it's sort of like an aggregation of an aggregation. So we're getting into a little bit of the kind of Russian nesting doll type of thing here, right? So in this example, going back to my aggregations, right, I've got a little table of data, and this bar represents an average of the sales values. So why is the product A blue bar 15? Well, if you average 10 and 20, that gets you 15, okay? So that's just how an aggregation works. It's averaging rows of data. But if we flip forward into the table calculations diagram, a window average, what that would do is average these averages. So if you took 15, 30, and 6, you add those all together, that gets you, I think, 51. Is that right? There's 3 bars, so 51 divided by 3, that's how you get 17. Okay, so that is the concept of a window average. So let's look at a couple of these in practice and then talk about, why should you care and, what specifically do these have to do with anything, okay? So first up, let me dive into this bar chart here. It says which subcategory sales are above average, all right? So I'm gonna flip to the analytics pane for a minute and drag a average line to my bar chart, okay? So I'll just make it across the entire table. There's only one dimension here, so it doesn't make a huge difference at this point. So there's my average line. So it's not like we see a calculation that Tableau did to come up with that value, but if there was a calculation behind it, it would be the window average sum of sales, right? And how do I know that? Because it's looking at the sum of sales pill up here and then giving us an average of those sums, okay? So if I want to know if a value is above or below that average, let's create a calculated field, and I'll say above average sales. All right. And then the way this would work is I would say, is the sum of sales greater than or equal to the window average sum of sales? Okay. Now let me show you some of the functions that exist over here. I'm going to go ahead and do the little breakout window, pop down into the table calculation section. So you'll see there's actually an entire host of window functions, right? Probably a lot of aggregations you're already familiar with. Things like min, max, average, sum, median, count, a lot of those old trusty favorites, okay? So what is this saying? This is saying, look at a bar and then look at the average and tell me, is that bar greater than or equal to the average or not? Okay. So we'll take that above average sales, drop that on color, and then let me select edit colors, and then maybe true be kind of a positive connotation and false will be more of a negative connotation. I'm gonna go with the classic colorblind friendly orange blue. Okay, so that's sort of maybe a basic application of a window average. So let's duplicate this sheet and we're gonna get a little bit more advanced. All right. Oh, if I could spell advanced, that's probably the first challenge. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna throw category onto my row shelf along with subcategory. So currently, the average line is still just an average for the entire worksheet. What if I want to change that though? What if I want to see an average per category? So what's the average sales for furniture? What's the average sales for office supplies? Okay, you can actually see it sort of temporarily calculating when I make these selections, all right? But if I want that to just be displaying all the time, I'm gonna right click and edit my reference line, and I'm gonna change the scope from table to pane, okay? So a little bit of a recap, what are table, pane, and cell? Like now I have 2 dimensions on rows in this worksheet, right? So table is kind of synonymous with worksheet. So if I said, give me an average at the table level, that would just say, give me an average across the entire worksheet. Pane, the way that I describe that is it's like the parent level dimension, okay? So what does that mean? In this case, each subcategory rolls up to a category. So like chairs would roll up to furniture, right? So category is the parent level dimension, and then category is the child level dimension in this scenario. And then cell, that's like an individual data point level. So that'd be like 1 average per bar, kind of meaningless in this case. So let's flip this to per pane, and you will see that now we get a unique average for each section, okay? So let's hit okay. And so kind of some good news, some bad news. Good news, we got the individual line per section. Bad news, this whole situation about is the value above or below the line, it doesn't, pardon me, it doesn't really work anymore, right? Or at least it doesn't work correctly. So yes, these are still true up here. However, like this value is above the line, so it should be blue, but it's currently orange because I think it by default is still thinking about the overall line, not just the office supplies line, okay? So how do we change that? Well, if we go back to this calculation, we are using a table calculation function, window average, right? So now you can see the little white table calculation triangle. It's our little visual indicator that we're using a table calculation function there. Now, if I hit this drop down on my above average sales calculation on color, and then say edit table calculation, currently it's just determining if it's above or below an average of the entire table. So similar to how we changed the reference line, we're going to change the table calculation to instead reference pane down. And now those colors should be accurate relative to the reference line for just that category. So you can see like this, let me go back one step. You know, previously this bar was orange, which was incorrect. This bar is above the office supplies average. Go forward to when we changed it from table down to pane down, now it's blue. It's above the average. That bar is still orange though. It's below the average. Okay, so these window functions give you the ability to do things like change the scope and direction depending on what you need. Okay. So here's kind of a little diagram which talks a bit about scope and direction. If you want to dive into that in more detail, again, there's a link in the description to a longer form video of ours that goes into table calculations. So next up, we're gonna look at window min and window max and a situation where we would apply those. Real quick before we dive into that though, if you check out this info button up here in the top corner, it's got a link to some of our upcoming Tableau classes. We really firmly believe that nobody should have to do it alone when it comes to the world of Tableau. It's an amazing and powerful tool. It's easy to learn initially, but it's hard to master, and that's where we hope to be able to help you. So every single month we're running classes about sort of the basics and advanced components of Tableau Desktop, calculations, Tableau Prep. We would love you and your colleagues to join us for one of those, so feel free to check that out. Okay, so diving into now window min and window max. Okay, I'll kind of show you one of my favorite scenarios. So we've got this question here: what are the highest and lowest selling subcategories in each region? All right. So how can I get these to highlight? All right. So currently, let me take the sum of sales, it's off color. We've just got a very basic text table that's just showing us sales by subcategory and region. All right. So how could I highlight the highest and lowest values in each column, basically? There's not a super easy way to do that. Like if I put sales on color and change my mark type to square so I get a highlight table, like that's helpful in the sense that I can kind of see the darker the value, the higher. But there's not a super easy way for me to say like just highlight the highest and lowest values, right? I could mess around with the color legend, but there's only so far we're going to be able to get with this. It's not It's also kind of confusing to have positive values be orange. I don't know. Okay, so let me give you an alternative. I'm going to create a calculated field. I'll call this highest/lowest value. And we're going to use our window min, window max to help us out here. So I will say if, all right, if sum of sales equals window max sum of sales, then highest value. Okay. Else if, zoom in a little bit so you all can see that, it's probably pretty small. Okay, let me just copy that, save myself some time. Else if sum of sales equals window min sum of sales, then lowest value. Else, we could call this probably anything. I'll just call this unremarkable. A little harsh, but it's true. Okay, so what am I doing here? I'm gonna need to define what my window is. Like my window or my scope could be the entire worksheet, it could be each row, or it could be each column. So we're gonna deal with that in a second, but basically I'm saying, I'm gonna use this on color. So one value is gonna be the highest value, one color is gonna be the lowest value, and then a final color will just be everything else. So I'll say, okay, there's a little bit of formatting work we're gonna have to do here, because if I just try and take this and just throw this on color, got some good news, some bad news. Good news is I'm seeing values for all of these things. The bad news is that Tableau highlight tables, where you have your mark type set to square, they don't work very well when you drop a discrete field on color, right? They work a lot better when you've got like a continuous, like a measure, but not really with a discrete field. So I'm gonna show you my kind of favorite little workaround for that. We're gonna turn this into bar charts. They're all gonna be the exact same size, and it's gonna look just like a highlight table. So let me switch my mark type to bar, which is at first gonna look weird. This is gonna be a little kind of nub of the beginning of a bar that doesn't do anything. And now I'm gonna create a calculated field that's gonna allow all of these bars to be the exact same size. So I'll just call this calculation 1, and the formula is just max 1. I'll put that one calculation on size. I'm gonna ratchet the size slider all the way to the top. I'm gonna go to color for a hot minute and add a border around those rectangles or those little squares. Maybe kind of something a little more subtle than the stark white. Okay, now let's get to cleaning this up and formatting this. So currently it's actually highlighting the highest value per row. You can see every single row has a blue value. So instead, what I'm gonna do is hit the drop down and edit the table calculation. It's calculating on table across, meaning each row is the scope. But instead I want table down, each column is its own kind of unique section. So do that, and now you'll see there's just one blue, one orange, and a bunch of red per column. Now I don't love those colors, so we're gonna change those, but we've defined our window now as essentially each column, window down, or window max and window min for table down. So we'll go edit our colors. If I want remarkable to be white so it doesn't stand out at all, I'm gonna double click on this. It's gonna take me through to my color editor, color picker. I'll hit white, say okay. And then if I wanna pick different colors here, I could. Honestly, the blue and the orange are probably fine. So I'll just kind of leave those as is for now. So now I can see that chairs or phones, one of those two always seems to be our highest selling category, and fasteners takes the cake as our lowest selling category per region. Cool. So that's a bit of a primer on window functions. Certainly there are many more. We just covered a few of the basics with window average, window min, window max. If you have questions on any of those other ones, please let us know. We could do another video that goes into some details on those. So thank you so much for checking this out. We really appreciate you being here. We drop new videos like this every single week, and we'd love to have you tag along. So feel free to subscribe and let us know what else you'd be interested in learning about. So thank you so much. Until next time.